Sheriff Crenshaw blocked the booth, arms crossed, grinning.
Somebody left the cage open. We got a stray in here. Get up. Animals eat outside, not at the table with people.
I'm just passing through town, having breakfast.
Crenshaw snorted.
Passing through? With what? Stolen money?
I'm a paying customer, Sheriff, that's all.
Get your ass up before I put you down like one.
Crenshaw grabbed him by the neck like a man snatching a stray off the street, slammed him chest first into the table. Cuffs clicked shut over scrambled eggs and spilled coffee. The whole diner watched. Not one voice, not one hand. But that man he just cuffed over scrambled eggs? One phone call. That's all it would take to end that sheriff's entire career. 6 hours earlier, Hadley Springs was the kind of town that looked perfect from the highway. White church steeple poking up through the trees, a single stoplight swinging in the breeze, lawns cut clean, porches swept. But that was the surface. Underneath, Hadley Springs ran on one rule, and everybody knew it. Sheriff Wade Crenshaw's rule. 22 years he'd worn that badge. 22 years nobody ran against him, nobody questioned him, nobody filed a complaint that went anywhere. The town had about 4,000 people, most of them white. The black families, maybe 12%, lived south of the railroad tracks, in smaller houses with older paint and longer waits for road repairs. Everyone was polite to each other at the grocery store, but polite and equal are two very different things. And the man who kept it that way drove a cruiser with mirrored sunglasses on the dash and a Confederate flag sticker barely hidden under the visor. That was Hadley Springs. Now, Malcolm Briggs had no business being in this town, not officially. He'd driven in late Friday night from Houston, rented a silver sedan, nothing fancy. Checked into the Blue Bonnet Motel on Route 9. The teenager at the front desk swiped his card, handed him a key, and didn't look twice at the name. Malcolm Briggs, FBI Director. The highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the United States. But that night he wasn't the director. He was just a man coming home. See, Malcolm grew up 3 states away. But his grandmother, Loretta Briggs, had lived her whole life in Hadley Springs, raised 6 kids in a shotgun house off Elm Street, went to Greater Hope Baptist every Sunday, made peach cobbler that the whole South Side still talked about 30 years later. She died when Malcolm was 24. He was at Quantico then, first year of FBI training. He made it to the funeral, but after that, he never came back. Life moved too fast. The ranks kept climbing. Quantico became the field office. The field office became Washington. Washington became the director's chair. 30 years passed. Now, at 54, Malcolm had a speech coming up at Howard University. The topic? Justice in small-town America. And somewhere during the writing of that speech, he realized he'd been talking about places like Hadley Springs his whole career. But he hadn't set foot in one since he buried his grandmother. So he drove down. No motorcade, no suit, no detail hovering over his shoulder. Just a man in a flannel shirt and reading glasses, carrying a leather briefcase with a draft of that speech inside. His security team, Senior Special Agent Nora Sullivan and one other agent, stayed 2 towns over at his request. They had GPS on his phone. Check-in was scheduled for noon Saturday. Malcolm wanted space. He wanted to walk the streets Loretta had walked, sit where she used to sit, eat where she used to eat. And that's exactly what he did. Saturday morning, 7:30 a.m. Malcolm pushed open the door of Sweetwater Diner. A little bell jingled above him. The smell hit first. Butter, bacon grease, coffee so strong it stung the back of your throat. The place hadn't changed much. Checkered tablecloths, vinyl booths patched with tape, a jukebox in the corner that still had Otis Redding on it. And behind the counter, Darlene Moore. 67 years old, silver hair pulled back, apron stained with a morning's worth of work. Malcolm sat at a corner booth, ordered black coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and grits. When he handed over his credit card, Darlene paused. "Briggs," she said softly. "You any relation to Loretta?" Malcolm looked up. "She was my grandmother." Darlene's face broke open into a smile. She pointed to a photo on the wall, a young black woman in a Sunday hat standing in front of Greater Hope Baptist. "That's her, right there. Sweetest woman God ever made." Malcolm stared at the photo for a long time. Then he nodded. "Yes, ma'am. She was." Darlene poured his coffee herself, extra hot, on the house, and for the next 30 minutes, Malcolm Briggs sat in that booth, reading the newspaper, eating eggs, and feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The grill sizzled. The AM radio hummed low. Sunlight stretched across the checkered tablecloth. It wouldn't last. At 8:05 a.m., the bell above the door jingled again. Sheriff Wade Crenshaw walked in like he owned the building, and, in a way, he did. Not on paper, but in practice. Every head in that diner turned, nodded, then looked away. That's how it worked. You acknowledged Crenshaw. You didn't challenge him. Deputy Jenny Dawson trailed behind him. 31 years old, blonde hair pulled tight under her hat, eyes always a half-second behind the sheriff's, watching him the way a dog watches a hand that's hit it before. Crenshaw's morning routine never changed. Coffee, biscuit, a lap around the room to remind everyone he was there. He slapped Earl Finch on the shoulder. "Earl, how's that fence coming?" "Almost done, Sheriff." "Good man." He nodded at two women in a booth near the window, winked at Darlene behind the counter. The whole room moved around him like water around a rock. Natural, practiced, automatic. Then his eyes landed on the corner booth, a black man, alone, reading a newspaper, eating eggs like he had nowhere to be. Crenshaw's jaw tightened. He turned to Dawson and spoke low, but not low enough. "The hell is that?" Dawson glanced over, saw nothing out of place. A man eating breakfast. She said nothing. Crenshaw straightened his belt, tugged his hat down, and walked toward the booth with the kind of slow, deliberate stride that wasn't about getting somewhere. It was about making sure everyone saw him going. He stopped at Malcolm's table, stood over him, legs wide, one hand resting on his holster. Not sitting, not leaning, just towering. Malcolm didn't look up right away. He finished the sentence he was reading. Then he removed his glasses, folded them, set them on the table. "Morning, Sheriff." Crenshaw didn't return the greeting. "I don't know you," he said, "and I know everybody in this town. So I'm going to ask you once. What are you doing here?" "Having breakfast," Malcolm said. "Passing through." "Passing through." Crenshaw repeated it like the words tasted bad. "From where?" "Houston." "Houston." Crenshaw looked him up and down. Slow, the way you'd inspect something on the bottom of your shoe. "Long way to drive for some eggs." "I'm visiting family." "Family?" Crenshaw almost laughed. "You got family here? In Hadley Springs?" "My grandmother lived here. Loretta Briggs." "Never heard of her." Behind the counter, Darlene flinched. Her hand curled around the dish towel. She'd known Loretta for 40 years. Everybody in this town had known Loretta, Crenshaw included. Malcolm saw it. He didn't react. He just said, "Well, she's been gone a long time." Crenshaw leaned forward, both hands flat on the table now, close enough that Malcolm could smell the tobacco and cheap aftershave. "Let me tell you how this works, friend. A stranger shows up in my town, driving a rental, no local ties I can verify. I have every right to ask questions. Now, show me some ID." Malcolm reached into his jacket slowly, pulled out his Virginia driver's license, placed it on the table. Crenshaw picked it up, held it between two fingers like it was dirty. Virginia. Malcolm Briggs. He looked at the photo, looked at Malcolm, looked at the photo again. "You're a long way from home, Malcolm." "Yes, sir." Crenshaw walked the license back to Dawson. "Run it." Dawson keyed the name into her shoulder radio. 30 seconds of static. Then dispatch came back. Clean. No warrants, no record. Nothing. Dawson looked at Crenshaw. "He's clear, Sheriff." A normal officer would have handed back the ID and walked away, maybe even apologized. That's what the law required. That's what basic human decency required. Crenshaw did neither. He walked back to the booth, tossed the license onto the table like a losing hand of cards. "Stand up." Malcolm looked at him. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Stand up. I need to pat you down." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I said so." The diner was frozen, forks down, eyes locked. The AM radio played a Patsy Cline song that nobody heard. Darlene stepped forward. "Wade, the man is just eating. Leave him be." Crenshaw didn't even turn around. "Darlene, sit down. This doesn't concern you." "He's a guest in my restaurant. I said, sit down." Darlene went quiet, not because she agreed, because she knew what happened to people who pushed back against Wade Crenshaw. She'd seen it. She'd lived it. Malcolm stood, slowly, not because he was told to, but because he chose to. He placed his napkin on the table, straightened his shirt, and looked Crenshaw dead in the eye. "I'm standing because I choose to, Sheriff, not because you ordered me." Something dark flickered across Crenshaw's face. That wasn't the response he wanted. He wanted fear. He wanted a flinch. He wanted the whole diner to watch a black man shrink. Instead, he got a wall. "Turn around, hands on the table." Malcolm turned, placed his palms flat. Crenshaw patted him down hard, shoulders, ribs, waist, pockets. Found nothing. Not a weapon, not a knife, not even a stick of gum, because there was nothing to find. Earl Finch, from across the room, raised his coffee mug. "Can't be too careful these days, Sheriff." He said it like a man watching a show he was enjoying. Crenshaw finished the pat-down, stepped back, saw Malcolm's rental car keys on the table. "Rental car. Where's it parked?" "Out front. Silver Camry." "I'm going to need to search that vehicle." "No." Malcolm's voice didn't rise, didn't waver, just one clean word. "I do not consent to a search of my vehicle." The whole room felt the shift. It was like watching a wire pull tight. Crenshaw's neck went red. He wasn't used to that word. Not from anyone in this town, and especially not from a black man in his diner, in front of his people. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no. You have no probable cause, no warrant, and I've done nothing wrong." Crenshaw smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile a man puts on right before he does something ugly. "That sounds like obstruction to me." He grabbed Malcolm's wrist, twisted it behind his back. Malcolm didn't resist, didn't swing, didn't raise his voice. He just turned his head slightly and said 5 words. "You're making a mistake, Sheriff." Crenshaw yanked the second arm back, slapped the cuffs on. The metal bit into Malcolm's wrists. Click, click. "The only mistake here," Crenshaw said, "is you coming to my town." He shoved Malcolm toward the door, past the booths, past the silent faces, past Darlene, who stood behind the counter with tears running down her cheeks. In the corner booth, the teenager with the phone was still recording. Her hands were shaking. But she didn't stop. Outside, the morning sun hid Malcolm's face. The birds were still singing. The stoplight still swung in the breeze. Hadley Springs looked exactly the same as it had 10 minutes ago. But nothing was the same. Crenshaw opened the back door of his cruiser, pushed Malcolm's head down, shoved him inside. No Miranda rights, no explanation, no paperwork. Just a black man in handcuffs in the back of a squad car. For the crime of eating eggs. Crenshaw pulled out of the diner parking lot slow. No sirens, no rush. He wanted people to see. He wanted the whole town to watch that cruiser roll down Main Street with a black man locked in the back. And they did. A woman sweeping her porch stopped mid-stroke. 2 men outside the hardware store turned and stared. A kid on a bicycle slowed down, mouth open. Nobody waved at the sheriff this time. They just watched. Malcolm sat in the back seat, hands cuffed behind him, spine straight, eyes forward. The vinyl seat was cracked and hot from the morning sun. The cage partition smelled like sweat and old metal. He didn't speak, didn't ask where they were going. He already knew. Deputy Dawson followed in the second cruiser. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. She'd seen Crenshaw pull this kind of thing before. Never this aggressive, never this public. Something in her gut told her this one was different. She was right. The Hadley Springs Sheriff's Office sat at the end of Birch Street, a squat brick building with 3 holding cells, a front desk, and a parking lot that could fit maybe 6 cars. The American flag out front hung limp in the heat. Crenshaw pulled up right at the entrance, got out, opened the back door, and grabbed Malcolm by the arm. "Out, let's go." He walked Malcolm through the front door like a trophy, chest out, hat tipped back, grinning. Officer Trent Adler was behind the desk, mid-40s, thin mustache, cup of gas station coffee going cold beside his keyboard. He looked up and saw the sheriff marching a handcuffed black man through the door. His face went confused. "Book him," Crenshaw said. "Obstruction of justice. Failure to comply." Adler blinked. "What happened?" "I gave a lawful order. He refused. That's all you need to know. Book him." Adler looked at Malcolm. Malcolm looked back. Calm. Steady. The kind of calm that made Adler more nervous than if the man had been screaming. "Yes, sir," Adler said. And he started the paperwork. Fingerprints. Mugshot. Malcolm stood in front of the height chart while Adler fumbled with the camera. Flash. Click. The most powerful law enforcement officer in the country, photographed like a common criminal in a 3-cell county lockup. Crenshaw leaned against the doorframe the whole time, arms crossed, watching, savoring. "You know what your problem is?" Crenshaw said. "You people always think you can walk into a place and act like you run it, like the rules don't apply to you. But in this town, my rules apply. To everybody." Malcolm said nothing. He let the silence do the talking. "What? Nothing to say now? Big man in the diner talking about rights and consent. Where's all that mouth now?" Malcolm looked at him. Not with anger, not with fear, with something Crenshaw couldn't read. And that made it worse. "I'd like my phone call," Malcolm said. Crenshaw laughed. "You'll get it when I decide you get it." "That's a constitutional right, Sheriff, not a favor." "In here?" Crenshaw pushed off the doorframe and stepped closer. "In here, I'm the Constitution." He pointed to the holding cell. Adler walked Malcolm in. The steel door clanged shut. The lock echoed off the cinder block walls. Malcolm sat on the metal bench. The mattress was a thin pad that smelled like bleach and sweat. A single fluorescent tube buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds. No window, no clock. Just gray walls and the faint sound of Crenshaw's boots walking back down the hallway. And that's when Crenshaw decided to search the car. He drove back to the diner alone. The silver Camry was still parked out front. Crenshaw didn't have a warrant, didn't have consent, didn't have probable cause. He didn't care. He popped the trunk. Nothing. Checked under the seats. Nothing. Opened the glove box. Rental agreement, a pair of sunglasses, a pack of tissues. He almost closed it. Then he saw the leather briefcase on the passenger seat. He opened it. Inside, a manila folder marked Howard University, speech draft. A leather-bound notebook. A government-issued phone charger. And at the bottom, tucked inside a felt pocket, an FBI credentials case. Crenshaw flipped it open. The gold badge caught the light. The photo ID stared back at him. Malcolm Briggs, Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Crenshaw looked at it for 5 seconds. Then he snorted. "FBI Director." He said it out loud to nobody. "Right, and I'm the damn president." He tossed the credentials back onto the seat, closed the briefcase, walked back to his cruiser. In his mind, the math was simple. A black man with a fake FBI badge, probably bought it online, probably trying to scam somebody. It never, not for 1 second, occurred to Wade Crenshaw that the badge was real. Because in his world, a black man could not be the FBI director. That job belonged to someone else. Someone who looked like him. He drove back to the station, walked past Adler's desk, went straight to the holding cell, and sat in a folding chair across from the bars. "So I searched your car," he said, casual, like he was talking about the weather. Malcolm looked up. "Without a warrant." "Found something interesting. An FBI badge." Crenshaw grinned. "Real nice one, too. Where'd you buy it? eBay?" "That badge is real, Sheriff." "Sure it is. And that makes you, what? The director of the FBI?" He laughed, slapped his knee. Malcolm didn't blink. "Yes, that's exactly what that makes me." Crenshaw stopped laughing, studied Malcolm's face for any crack, any smirk, any sign of a bluff. He found nothing but stone. For one brief second, one half-second, something cold moved through Crenshaw's chest. A whisper. A doubt. What if? Then he crushed it. "You're full of it," he said, stood up, walked out. Back in the hallway, Dawson was waiting. She'd been listening. "Sheriff," she said quietly, "I saw that badge when you brought his things in. It looked real." "It's fake. Maybe we should just verify." "I said it's fake, Dawson. Drop it." Dawson dropped it. She walked back to her desk, sat down, pulled out her personal phone under the desk, and texted her husband 3 words. "Something bad happening." Meanwhile, 40 miles away, Agent Nora Sullivan checked her phone. 10 a.m., Text to Director Briggs. No reply. She waited. Sent another at 10:30. Nothing. 11 a.m. Still nothing. She pulled up his GPS. The blue dot sat right on top of the Hadley Springs Sheriff's Office. Sullivan picked up her desk phone, dialed the station. 3 rings. Adler picked up. Hadley Springs Sheriff's Office. This is Senior Special Agent Nora Sullivan, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm calling regarding a man you may have in custody. Malcolm Briggs. Adler's stomach dropped. He put the call on hold, walked to Crenshaw's office. Door open. Crenshaw was leaning back in his chair, boots on the desk. Sheriff, there's an FBI agent on the line, asking about the guy in holding. Crenshaw didn't move. Tell her we're handling a local matter. She said she's a senior special agent, and I said hang up the phone, Trent. Adler walked back to his desk, picked up the receiver. Ma'am, the sheriff says this is a local matter. The line went dead. Sullivan had already hung up. She stared at her phone for 3 seconds. Then she called the FBI Houston field office. This is SSA Sullivan. I need a tactical team mobilized to Hadley Springs, Texas, immediately. The director has been detained by local law enforcement. This is not a drill. Back in the cell, Malcolm sat on the metal bench, hands folded, still as concrete. 2 hours now. No phone call. No water. The fluorescent light buzzed and flickered. He heard boots. Crenshaw appeared on the other side of the bars. Folding chair. Same smirk. Last chance, Crenshaw said. Tell me who you really are. And maybe I don't add possession of fraudulent government credentials to your charges. Malcolm looked at him, and for the first time his expression shifted, not to anger, to something quiet, something almost sad. Sheriff, I've told you who I am. I've asked for my phone call, which is my constitutional right. You've denied it. I've told you that badge is real. You've laughed at it. Everything that happens from this point forward is on you. Every single consequence. On you. Crenshaw tilted his head. Is that a threat? No, Malcolm said. It's the last bit of mercy you're going to get. The fluorescent light flickered. The station was quiet. And somewhere on a highway outside of Houston, 3 black Suburbans were doing 90 miles an hour, headed straight for Hadley Springs. 12:47 p.m. Hadley Springs had never seen anything like it. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans rolled down Main Street in a tight line. No sirens, no lights. Just 3 tons of tinted glass and federal authority moving through town like a slow rolling storm. People stopped on the sidewalk. A man dropped his grocery bag. The woman at the post office stepped outside and just stared. The Suburbans pulled into the sheriff's station parking lot. Perfect V formation. Engines cut. Silence. Then the doors opened. Agent Nora Sullivan stepped out first. Dark suit, FBI badge on her hip, sidearm visible, sunglasses off. Her face was the kind of calm that came right before someone's life fell apart. 6 agents followed, all suited, all armed, all moving with the kind of precision that only federal training puts into a person's walk. Sullivan pushed through the station's front door. The hinges groaned. The air conditioning was barely working. Adler was behind the desk, mid-bite into a sandwich. He saw the badges, the suits, the sidearms. The sandwich hit the desk. I'm Senior Special Agent Nora Sullivan, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Her voice filled the room without rising. You are holding FBI Director Malcolm Briggs in your custody. Take me to him. Now. Adler's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Crenshaw heard the commotion from his office. He stepped into the hallway, saw the suits, saw the badges, saw the Suburbans through the window. Black, massive, unmistakable. His smirk was gone. Sullivan locked eyes on him. "Are you Sheriff Crenshaw?" Yeah, who's asking?" "I just told you who's asking." She took one step closer. "Where is Director Briggs?" Crenshaw's tongue went dry. His eyes darted to Adler, to Dawson, who was standing in the corner, arms folded, face white as paper. Back to Sullivan. "Now hold on," he said. His voice cracked on the second word. "We got a situation here, a local matter. The man didn't have proper—" "Where is he?" Crenshaw pointed down the hallway. He didn't speak. His arm was shaking. Sullivan walked past him. Her shoulder nearly brushed his. He flinched. She reached the holding cell, stopped. Malcolm Briggs sat on the metal bench, hands folded in his lap, back straight. The fluorescent light buzzed above him. His shirt was wrinkled. His wrists had red marks from the cuffs. But his eyes were exactly the same as they'd been at 7:30 that morning. Calm, steady, unbroken. "Director Briggs," Sullivan said. "Are you injured?" "No." Malcolm stood, rolled his shoulders. "But I'd like these cuffs off." Sullivan turned, looked at Crenshaw, who had followed her down the hallway like a man walking to his own sentencing. "Uncuff him. Now." Crenshaw's hands were trembling. He fumbled for the keys on his belt, dropped them once, picked them up. His fingers couldn't find the right one. "I didn't. He never showed me any." "He showed you his driver's license," Sullivan said. "He told you his name. You searched his vehicle, illegally, and found his FBI credentials. You held them in your hands. And you laughed." Crenshaw said nothing. "Uncuff him, Sheriff. I won't ask again." Crenshaw stepped forward. His hands shook so hard the keys rattled against the steel. He unlocked the left cuff, then the right. Malcolm rubbed his wrists, slow circles. The red marks ran deep. He looked at Crenshaw, didn't raise his voice, didn't curse, didn't threaten. He just spoke, and every word landed like a gavel. "I told you exactly who I was. 3 times. You didn't believe me. Not because I lacked credentials, not because I lacked identification, but because you looked at me and decided that a black man couldn't possibly hold that title. That's not a mistake, Sheriff. That's who you are." Crenshaw's mouth moved. Nothing came out. Sullivan handed Malcolm his phone, his briefcase, his credentials, everything recovered from the rental car. Malcolm straightened his collar, put his reading glasses back in his pocket, and walked out of that cell the same way he'd walked into that diner, unhurried, upright, and unbroken. He stepped outside. The afternoon sun hit his face. 6 FBI agents flanked him on either side. The Suburbans idled in the lot. Across the street, a crowd had gathered. Word travels fast in a town of 4,000. Darlene Moore was there, hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming. The teenager from the diner was there, too, phone still out, still recording. Malcolm turned to Sullivan. "I want a full federal civil rights investigation opened into the Hadley Springs Sheriff's Department, effective immediately. Every traffic stop, every arrest, every complaint filed against this office in the last 20 years. All of it." "Already in motion, sir." Malcolm looked back at the station door. Crenshaw stood in the frame, gripping the doorpost like it was the only thing holding him upright. 22 years of power. 22 years of fear. 22 years of walking into rooms and watching people shrink. All of it, ending right here in a parking lot under the afternoon sun, because he couldn't believe a black man eating breakfast was worth more than his badge. Malcolm held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then he turned away. He didn't need to say another word. The Suburbans said it for him. It took less than an hour for Wade Crenshaw's world to collapse. The first thing he did was call Commissioner Boyd Stockton. His fingers were still shaking when he dialed. 4 rings. 5. Voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Stockton had already heard. The whole county had already heard. And a man who'd spent 20 years covering for Wade Crenshaw suddenly couldn't find his phone. Crenshaw sat in his office. Door closed, blinds shut. The badge on his chest felt heavier than it had that morning. His hands smelled like the metal of the handcuffs he'd used on a man who outranked every law enforcement officer in the country. At 2:15 p.m., his desk phone rang. It wasn't Stockton. It was the county attorney. 3 sentences. Formal. Final. Sheriff Crenshaw. Effective immediately, you are suspended from duty pending a federal investigation. Please surrender your badge, your firearm, and your keys to the station. Do not contact any member of your department until further notice. Crenshaw set the phone down, stared at the wall. 22 years. 22 years of running this town. And it was over before dinner. He unclipped the badge, set it on the desk. It made a small sound against the wood. Quiet. Almost nothing. But it was the loudest thing he'd ever heard. Outside, the parking lot was chaos. 2 news vans had already arrived from Tyler. A reporter from the Houston Chronicle was on the phone, pacing back and forth, scribbling in a notebook. A helicopter, news chopper, circled overhead, low enough to rattle the windows. Crenshaw stepped outside. He didn't know what he expected. Maybe silence. Maybe nothing. Instead, he found Malcolm Briggs standing by the lead Suburban, phone to his ear, surrounded by agents. Crenshaw walked toward him. Slow. Hat in his hands now, not on his head. A small thing, but it said everything. Director Briggs, he started. His voice was different, smaller. Sir, I want you to know, this was a misunderstanding. I was doing my job. I didn't know. Malcolm lowered the phone, looked at him. Not with rage, not with satisfaction, with something worse. Clarity. Your job, Malcolm said. Let me tell you what your job was this morning, Sheriff. Your job was to protect every person in this county, every single one, regardless of what they look like, where they come from, or what they're eating for breakfast. He took one step closer. What you did in that diner wasn't law enforcement. It was bigotry with a badge. And the fact that you're standing here calling it a misunderstanding tells me you still don't understand what you did. Crenshaw opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes were wet, not from guilt, from fear. The fear of a man who just realized the ground he'd been standing on for 2 decades was never solid. I'm sorry. No, Malcolm said quietly. You're scared. That's not the same thing. He turned away. The conversation was over. That's when Deputy Jenny Dawson stepped forward. She'd been standing near the station entrance for the last 20 minutes, watching, listening, turning something over in her hands, a USB drive. She walked straight to Agent Sullivan, didn't look at Crenshaw, didn't hesitate. "Body cam footage," she said, "from this morning. Everything from the diner to the station. And my written statement, 6 pages. I'll testify."
Sullivan took the drive.
"Thank you, Deputy." Dawson nodded. Then she looked at Crenshaw, just once, and the look on her face wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. The exhaustion of a woman who had watched this happen too many times and finally decided she was done watching. By 6 p.m., the teenager's diner video was on Twitter. By 8 p.m., it had 4 million views. By Sunday morning, every major news network in the country was running the same headline. Small-town sheriff arrests FBI director for eating while black. CNN Fox, MSNBC, ABC. The story was everywhere. The diner video played on loop. Crenshaw kicking the booth, grabbing Malcolm's neck, slamming cuffs on. Dawson's body cam footage filled in the rest. The station, the mugshot, the denial of a phone call, the mocking of the FBI badge. Together, the two videos told a story that no press release could spin, no attorney could reframe, no apology could undo. Crenshaw's lawyer released a statement Saturday night. An unfortunate case of misidentification. Nobody bought it. Not one person. Commissioner Stockton held a press conference Sunday morning. He stood behind a podium, sweating through his shirt, and said the words he thought would save him. "The actions of Sheriff Crenshaw do not represent the values of Hadley County." 22 years. He'd signed off on every budget, every complaint dismissal, every quiet transfer. And now he stood there pretending he'd never met the man. The cameras kept rolling, and Hadley Springs kept burning. The FBI Civil Rights Division landed in Hadley Springs on Monday morning. 4 investigators, 2 analysts, a federal prosecutor from the Southern District of Texas. They set up in the conference room of the only hotel in town, the Blue Bonnet Motel, same place Malcolm had checked into 2 nights before. They started with the records. 20 years of traffic stops, 20 years of arrest reports, 20 years of complaints. The Hadley Springs Sheriff's Office kept everything in filing cabinets. No digital backup, no external oversight. Just paper, locked in a room that only Crenshaw had the key to. They broke the lock on Tuesday. What they found inside was worse than anyone expected. 342 traffic stops of Black and Latino drivers on the same stretch of Highway 12 over the past decade. 41 stops of white drivers. Same road, same speed limit, same 10-mile stretch. The ratio wasn't a pattern, it was a policy. 14 excessive force complaints, every single one filed by a person of color, every single one dismissed, and every single dismissal signed by the same hand, Wade Crenshaw. 3 cases where charges were fabricated from nothing. A Black teenager arrested for loitering outside his own house. A Latino truck driver detained for 12 hours over a suspicious cargo manifest that turned out to be a grocery delivery. A Black woman pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. The deputy's body cam proved it. All 3 cases buried. All 3 complainants pressured into silence. And then they found the shredder logs. Crenshaw had ordered Adler and 2 previous deputies to destroy complaint records on 4 separate occasions. The deputies kept copies, not out of bravery, but out of self-preservation. They knew one day the walls would close in. They just didn't know it would be because of a plate of scrambled eggs. Deputy Dawson cooperated fully. She sat in that motel conference room for 9 hours over 2 days. She gave them everything. Names, dates, patterns, internal conversations she'd overheard, orders she'd been given that she knew were wrong. "He told me once," she said, voice steady, eyes red, "that the South Side needed to be reminded who was in charge at least once a month. Those were his exact words. Once a month." 2 former deputies came forward within the week. Their testimonies matched Dawson's, nearly word for word. The culture inside that department wasn't just toxic, it was engineered. Crenshaw hadn't inherited a broken system, he'd built one. The federal grand jury convened 6 weeks later in Houston. The indictment came down on a Thursday. 23 counts. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law. 18 U.S.C. Section 242. 4 counts. 1 for Malcolm Briggs, 3 for the fabricated arrest victims. False arrest and unlawful imprisonment. 2 counts. Illegal search and seizure. 4th Amendment violation. 2 counts. Obstruction of justice. Denying Malcolm's phone call, dismissing FBI credentials, ordering Adler to hang up on a federal agent. 3 counts. Pattern of civil rights abuses. Enhanced charges based on the 20-year record of racial targeting. 12 counts. Total, 23 federal charges. No bail. Crenshaw was arrested at his home at 6 a.m. on a Friday. He was eating breakfast when they knocked. The irony was not lost on anyone. Commissioner Boyd Stockton was indicted separately. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, destruction of public records, failure to report civil rights violations. 8 counts. His 20-year partnership with Crenshaw, the budget approvals, the complaint dismissals, the quiet transfers of deputies who asked too many questions, all of it laid out in black and white. The trial began 4 months later. Federal Court, Houston. Judge Eleanor Pace presiding. Crenshaw's defense was simple. Honest mistake. No racial intent. A sheriff doing his job in a town with limited resources and rising concerns about outsiders. The prosecution's case was simpler. They played the diner video first. The whole courtroom heard it. "Somebody left the cage open." The gasps were audible. Then Dawson's body cam, the mugshot, the mocking of the FBI badge. Crenshaw's voice, clear as daylight. "You people always think you can walk into a place and act like you run it." Then the statistics. 342 stops versus 41. A chart projected on the screen. 2 bars, side by side. 1 towering, 1 barely visible. No explanation needed. Then the witnesses. 11 victims over 2 decades. One by one, they took the stand. The teenager, the truck driver, the woman with the tail light. 8 others who had never filed complaints because they were afraid. They weren't afraid anymore. Then Dawson. 6 hours of testimony. Calm, detailed, devastating. Then the 2 former deputies. Their voices shook, but they didn't stop. Crenshaw's attorney put him on the stand as a last resort. It lasted 40 minutes. The cross-examination lasted 4. The federal prosecutor asked one question that ended it. "Sheriff Crenshaw, if a white man in a flannel shirt had been sitting in that same booth, eating that same breakfast, at that same time of morning, would you have demanded his ID?" Crenshaw paused. 3 seconds. 4. 5. "I would have assessed the situation the same way I, yes or no, Sheriff." 6 seconds. 7. He never answered. He didn't have to. The jury had already seen enough. Guilty. All major counts. The verdict took less than 4 hours. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Judge Pace spoke for 12 minutes. The courtroom was silent. Mr. Crenshaw, the badge you wore for 22 years was a symbol of public trust. You turned that symbol into a weapon. You used your authority not to protect, but to control, to humiliate, and to harm. You targeted people based on the color of their skin. You destroyed evidence. You silenced victims. And when you held the credentials of the FBI director in your own hands, you could not, you would not, believe that a black man could hold that title. This court will not tolerate the corruption of law enforcement into an instrument of racial oppression. 12 years. Federal prison. No early parole on the civil rights charges. Pension revoked. Stockton. 4 years. Permanent ban from public office. Crenshaw stood when they read the sentence. His legs buckled slightly. The marshals caught his arms. He looked at the gallery, the cameras, the reporters, the faces of the 11 people he'd spent 20 years silencing. None of them looked away. 3 weeks later, Hadley Springs held a community meeting at Greater Hope Baptist Church. Standing room only. Darlene Moore stood at the front. Her voice cracked twice, but she didn't stop. "I've been afraid in this town for 40 years, she said. Afraid to speak, afraid to complain, afraid to look that man in the eye. I'm 67 years old, and this is the first time I feel like I can breathe." The room didn't applaud. They just cried. Together. A special election was held the following month. The new sheriff, the first in Hadley Springs history to undergo mandatory federal civil rights training, took office on a Monday. That same week, Malcolm Briggs stood behind a lectern at Howard University. The auditorium was packed, standing room only. He didn't mention Hadley Springs by name. He didn't have to. "I sat in a jail cell not long ago," he said. "Not because I broke a law, but because someone with a badge decided that my skin was a crime. And I want every person in this room to know the system that put me in that cell is the same system I've spent my life trying to fix. And I'm not done." The room stood. Every single person. So, where are they now? Malcolm Briggs stayed on as FBI director, but something shifted after Hadley Springs. He launched a nationwide initiative, a federal oversight program targeting small-town police departments with repeated civil rights complaints. The kind of departments that operate in the dark. The kind where one man wears the badge and writes the rules, and nobody checks the math. The program was named the Loretta Briggs Community Trust Initiative, after his grandmother. The woman in the Sunday hat on the wall of Sweetwater Diner. Malcolm still visits Hadley Springs when he's in Texas, drives the same silver rental sedan, sits in the same corner booth, orders the same thing: black coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and grits. Darlene still pours his coffee herself, extra hot, on the house. The photo of Loretta Briggs is still on the wall, but now it sits inside a gilded frame. Darlene bought it the week after the trial. "She deserved better than a thumbtack," she told a reporter. "She always did." Wade Crenshaw is serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility in Beaumont, Texas. He lost his pension. Lost his house, couldn't keep up the payments. Lost his wife. She filed for divorce 3 months into the sentence. His name shows up now in law enforcement training academies across the country, not as a lesson in policing, as a warning. Cadets study his case the way medical students study malpractice. What went wrong? Where the system failed? How one man's unchecked authority poisoned an entire community for 2 decades. His mugshot, the one taken the morning they arrested him at his own breakfast table, is projected on a screen in a classroom in Quantico. The same Quantico where Malcolm Briggs started his career 30 years ago. Commissioner Boyd Stockton completed his 4-year sentence. He was released to a town that no longer recognized him. No office, no allies, no handshake at the diner. He moved to Arkansas. Nobody followed. Deputy Jenny Dawson served as interim sheriff for 6 months during the transition. She did the job quietly. No speeches, no press tours. She answered every complaint personally. She reviewed every traffic stop. She unlocked the filing cabinet in the back room and left it open. After 6 months, she resigned. Took a position with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division as a field consultant. She travels to small towns now, the kind of towns that look perfect from the highway. She sits down with deputies and officers and asks one question. What are you afraid to report? Most of them answer, I spent years watching it happen, she told the journalist. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, but there's no right moment. There's just the moment you decide you're done being part of it. Hadley Springs changed. Not overnight, not all at once, but it changed. The Confederate memorial in the town square was removed by a public vote, 71 to 29%. It took 3 hours to take down what had stood for over 60 years. A few people protested. Most people watched in silence. Some of them cried. Not from loss, from relief. A community oversight board was established for the sheriff's department. 5 members, elected, 3 of them from the south side of the railroad tracks. For the first time in the town's history, the people most affected by policing had a seat at the table where policing was discussed. Sweetwater Diner is still open. Busier than ever, actually. People drive in from 2 counties over now. Not for the eggs, though the eggs are still good. They come because of the story. They come because of the photo on the wall. They come because Darlene Moore taped a framed copy of the Constitution right next to Loretta Briggs's picture. So nobody forgets what rats look like, she says, every time someone asks. Every single time. If that question hits you somewhere real, drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear it. Not the perfect answer, the honest one. And if this story made you feel something, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Because stories like this, they don't change the world by themselves. They change the world when people pass them on. I'll see you in the next one.
22 years behind that bar, and it all came apart over a plate of scrambled eggs. But here's what I keep coming back to. Crenshaw had Malcolm's FBI credential in his own hands, looked right at the badge, right at the photo, and laughed. Not because the evidence wasn't there, but because his mind had already decided what a black man could and couldn't be. And the other thing about prejudice, it doesn't just lie you to other people, it lies you to reality. Crenshaw didn't lose his career because Malcolm was powerful. He lost it because he was so locked inside his own virus that the truth was staring him in the face, and he couldn't see it. That's not just a mistake. That's a prison you build for yourself. So here's what I want you to see tonight. When someone decides who you are before you open your mouth, who really the ones in handcuffs, them or you? And if you ever been that person in the book, eating your breakfast, minding your business, and still not being enough, I see you. Drop your answer in the comments. Not the perfect ones, the honest one. If this story hit you somewhere real, share it, like, subscribe, because stories like this don't change the world by themselves. They change the world when people pass them on. I'll see you in the next one.